Five, four, three, two, one, and we are live with Paul Hutchinson. Huge thank you to him for coming on. Many of you watched the movie The Sound of Freedom, and if it didn't bring tears to your eyes, you are an absolute animale. Because having a young one myself, all the parents of the world who watched that must have been thinking, "Oh my God, can you imagine something like this happening to your child?" Absolutely monstrous. So Paul is a hugely successful entrepreneur, billionaire, author, etc. But put that to the side for the moment. He has gone out of his way to launch, I think it's almost 100 missions now to rescue kids, putting his own life on the line, getting in these dangerous situations. You saw the movie. I saw Paul actually on my friend Michael Francise's channel almost a year ago. And not only is his own personal story deeply moving, but also he has a deep insight through his own connections about the Epstein case, about what's going on with geopolitics in the world presently. So viewers, I know many of you are watching live right now. If you want to support Paul's work, all of his links are in the description box. And if you do have a question for him while we are live, please put it into the live chat. So huge thank you for coming on, man.
Well, thank you, Shaun. Incredibly grateful to spend time with you and your audience today.
And, since you've done all these other interviews, we saw the release of the Epstein files. So before we get into your story, we saw the administration campaign on they were going to release the Epstein files, Pam Bondi, Bongino, Kash Patel, etc. Yet when they got in, they fought tooth and nail not to release the files. What did you make of that, please?
Well, the challenge is, I think when they got into them, they realized that the implications went almost to the top on both sides of the aisle, and involved intelligence assets in our country and others. And they realized that, oh wow, this rabbit hole goes really deep, and we need to spend some time redacting. Well, the sad thing is they tell us that they're going to redact things to keep the victim safe. Well, they put the victims' names and information out there. They spent all of this energy redacting the names of the politicians, the influencers, the billionaires, the people who really we should know exactly who was there and what they were doing, so that we can bring people to justice.
So this aisle that you're referring to, then, to get to the top of that aisle, do you have to be compromised? And by that I mean they are taping these people at parties or in private, doing these monstrous things with kids.
Here's the thing. Just because somebody was on the plane doesn't mean that they broke the law or did anything immoral. Just because somebody went to the island, now that's a step towards a pretty dark outcome. I will say this: if you were an agency who wanted to control the votes of a federal judge, of a congressman, of a senator, or wanted to control the money and the decision making of a billionaire, if you wanted to control that forever, you get them on film with a 12-year-old, and you've got that level of control. And sadly, that's been in the playbook for a very, very long time with a lot of the intelligence agencies, that their darkest plan is all manipulation and blackmail and getting dirt on people. And 15, 20 years ago, you could get somebody in a compromised homosexual type position, and you could control them. Well, then that became more acceptable to the average person, and so they needed something darker. And that's where children were involved, and that's what we've seen front and center. And we need to demand full transparency from all of our governments. Anybody who has been there, we need full transparency of everything that was done.
So we've only seen a fraction of the files get released. If we were able to access the entirety of them, would the public just completely lose faith in the establishment?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I can. We're going to talk today about things that I have seen personally, and we're going to talk today about things that I have received information from very reliable sources, and from very, very reliable sources. I can tell you without a question, when the general public sees the depth of really what was going on with Epstein and other operations similar to that, when they realize how deep that rabbit hole goes, then yes, there's going to be uprisings. There's going to be people who will demand that many, many people in their leadership and their governments get replaced. They go to jail. They pay for their sins. This is incredibly disrupting to a lot of our governments when this information really comes out.
And Paul, how did they justify doing these monstrous things to the kids? Did they just say it's in the interest of national security? If we're not doing it, then, for example, other countries will do it, and then they'll get one step on ahead of us?
Absolutely. And the truth is, there's a lot of intelligence agencies in different countries that are involved. It's not just the U.S. And yes, it goes back to blackmail. It goes back to control. That's what these institutions need. They need to, if you are an up and coming political leader, or if you're an up and coming celebrity in Hollywood, we've had a lot of Hollywood actors who have come out with this very same story, that if you want to rise in the ranks of Hollywood, well, you need to be compromised. You need to go to these P. Diddy parties and these freak off parties and be a part of that, quote, inner circle. And in doing so, you're able to get lifted up in your quest for money and fame and power. This is the age-old Adam of selling your soul to the devil. It happens all the time, and this is sadly what happens in a lot of political cases. A lot of people in Hollywood, a lot of people that run massive social media companies and others have been compromised.
And I know you've invested in movies and people pitch you stuff. So when these pitches come through, having done all this work now, with the kids, are there certain actors' names who come up who you choose to now avoid?
Not only do I avoid not investing with them, we avoid even watching some of these films. My wife has a whole list of actors that she's done the due diligence on. And she says, nope, sorry, not that one. Sorry, not that one. We cannot support these people who are, I was a huge Will Smith fan for a long, long time. I loved, all of his movies, and we would watch it. It's so fun. But then when I realized what his ex-wife walked in on him doing, and what parties he was at, and how often he was involved with P. Diddy and other things, and who was at those parties, I couldn't support it anymore. We are working on some other films. We have one called Red Card, where Halle Berry and some others are involved. My wife is an actress, and she is helping to funnel some of our resources towards conscious movies that are bringing awareness. And so, but we want to make sure that there are good people like Halle and others who are involved that we can support in this fight against the darkness.
Wow. All right. So I want to just cover some new ground with you before we get back to your story then. So viewers who are tuning in, I'm here with Paul Hutchinson, and what a phenomenal story it is. So, what shaped your life to the point where you became this successful person and then started to use those resources to rescue the kids? If you could go back and just let us know what the factors were.
Absolutely. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist, not a regular doctor, but a surgeon, not a regular surgeon, but a heart surgeon, and not a regular heart surgeon, but one who operated on children. And I got in a major car accident, severed all the tendons in my hand. They didn't know if I'd have the dexterity to be a surgeon. I changed my major to business, finance, and built a very successful company in my early 20s that helped people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma. These are all things that we helped them overcome through a cognitive restructuring program. And I recognize in that process, we have 50,000 people a month calling in off of an infomercial. This was 35 years ago to get help with these challenges. And I recognize that most of them that were carrying this heavy energy carried it from deep-seated challenges in their youth. Many of them had faced the darkest of dark things as children, and it comes out in anger issues, and it comes out in behaviors that are not in line with being a good father and a good husband. It comes out in anxiety and depression, especially in women, and it comes out in some cases with those who take that pain and pass it on to others. We've all heard it said that hurt people hurt other people, and I realized at that point that most of the women that we know have been abused at some time in their life. 1/4 of them, it was as children. With men, it's a little bit less. It's 1 in 5 that deal with that kind of heavy energy. But even them, 1/4 of them was under the age of 10 years old in their own homes. And so we need to look at the world with a level of compassion and say, okay, instead of just fighting the fire with fire, instead of just, I led more than 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries. And I realized that just pulling the children out of hell was never going to fix the problem. We needed to pull the hell out of humanity. And that came from, my understanding as I was building this company that helped people overcome anxiety and depression. Now, I was very fortunate. I sold that company at 29 years old for a lot of money, for $20 million. And I used that to invest in everything from the movie to real estate. Then I built another company that ended up being almost 4,000 employees. And when I retired, we managed money for ultra wealthy investors. And in that world, I realized that there are some really good people who have made a lot of money, and there are others that had let arrogance and greed and lust completely control their life. Now, I had some training, a lot of training in my younger life, and had a certain set of skills that made me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. And about 12 years ago, was recruited by our Attorney General. He called me up and he said, Paul, I know you've donated millions of dollars to child-related charities. I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors in our area. I donated money to children's hospitals. And he said, I need to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and good people don't even know that it's happening. And he started talking about, moving humans around, and then he started talking about children and the horrible things that happen to children when they are taken, and even the horrible things that happen to children when they're at a sleepover at the friend's house, et cetera, and how prevalent this problem is. And there was a team of operators that were in Cartagena, Colombia, and they had found some kids, 20 children, who were in this situation that is just unimaginable. And he said they need some money to rescue these kids. And the government wouldn't give them the money to do it because they couldn't prove that there was any Americans involved. And he needed $50,000 to make it happen. And, for me at the time, $10,000 with Make-A-Wish that I was working with at the time, that would send a little girl to Disneyland with her family, which was important. She was struggling with cancer and really having a hard time. But here, $50,000, we could pull 20 children out of hell and get them back to their families. There wasn't a question. So I helped to make that happen. And then a few weeks later, one of the operators called me and he said, Paul, I'm in Cartagena, Colombia. He said, there's not just 20 children that we've identified, more than 50 here, and more than 100 children in other cities in this country that are all tied together. He said, we believe we can rescue them all on the same day at the same time, and we need to, because if we just take down one of these operations, then the others will hear about it. They'll go into hiding. He said, we believe we can rescue them all in the same day, but I need your help. And my ego me was like, well, how much do you need? Do you want me to write another check? And he said 3 words that changed my life. He said, we need you. I said, what do you mean you need me? He said, can you be in Colombia in 2 days? He said, he knew more about my background than most people. He knew I could deal with a somewhat dangerous situation, but he said, we need somebody who can effectively negotiate a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction with these people who are holding these children. He said that the guy in charge of everything has a piece of property that he wants to develop into a child resort, in words I can't even say online here, where foreigners would come and do these horrible things. And he needed a few $1 million to make it happen. And this guy had connections with all of the other guys who were doing these things to kids. And we needed to get him to call them and bring all of the children to the same place at the same time so that we could rescue them. And the plan is that I would fly down there as me. At the time, I had a very successful real estate investment firm. And I would fly down and say, hey, listen, I'm interested in funding your project, but I got to make sure that you have the ability to make it successful. So what we're going to do is I'm going to bring down a bunch of my buddies who are into this kind of thing, and we're going to have a party. And you're going to bring all of your, what he called inventory, and you're going to call all the other guys who also have quote unquote inventory, kids. And if we're happy with what we see, then I'll fund your project. So that phone call is what completely transformed everything. And we can go down that later in the call, whatever you want, but that's kind of the setup of where I was at the time. I was very successful in business, but had never seen how dark the world gets.
Yeah, I mean, people are riveted. Please expand on that call, Paul.
Well, when I said, yeah, I can beat into Colombia in 2 days. I said, but I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I was at a third generation multi-billionaire conference where I was raising money for my investment fund with all these billionaire families, and my home was West Coast. I said, well, I don't have time to fly home and change. How do I dress? What do I do? He says, well, just come as a wealthy business owner, a wealthy playboy. And at the time, I looked down. I'm wearing a suit that costs more than my first car. Right? I've got $2,000 cufflinks on. I'm like, you know what? I think I have the outfit. And so the next day, I jump on a plane to fly down there because I needed to be flying there all day. And there was a layover in Bogota. Now, on the way, I'd never been to Colombia. Now, I love Colombia now. It's literally one of my favorite places on the planet. But this time, I didn't know what I was getting into. And I had read that Pablo Escobar in the 80s, he paid $200 per head to have people executed, right? I mean, so your life is worth a couple $100. So I thought, wow, if I look like if I'm worth more than $200, I might be a target. Well, I looked down at my $2,000 cufflinks and my Gucci my Gucci bag and my Ray-Ban sunglasses. I'm thinking, well, I might be a target. Well, we had a layover in Bogota, and I was supposed to fly into Cartagena from then. There was a situation where the plane couldn't go to. We had to wait until the next day. And so I told the team, hey, sorry, I can't get in until the next morning, which was fine because that's when they were going to be meeting these horrible people. And I go out to get a taxi. Now, rule number 1, don't go to a second, third world country dressed like a target. Rule number 2, if you go out where the taxis are, get a reliable one, not a guy saying, hey, you need taxi, come to me, right? And so I sadly went with one of those guys, come over here, with who was identifying me as a target. I get in his car and I just said, let's take me to the Marriott. So he's driving and I see out of the corner of my eye, I see the Marriott. go by, and he didn't take the exit. I go, Marriott. He goes, oh, hotel. And I thought, okay. The second exit, he passes that one. The third, I'm like, oh, what's going on? He takes this exit, this dark, dangerous area of town. I mean, there's prostitutes, there's drug addicts, there's thugs all over the place. And he stops in front of this place that looks like you could rent it by the hour. And he goes, hotel. And I'm like, no, Marriott. He goes, no, hotel. Now, through the next 10 years of doing undercover work, I realized the importance of listening to that still small voice of truth that is within. So we could stay safe. Well, this wasn't a still small voice. This was everything inside me that was yelling, Paul, do not get out of the car. Do not get out. You're gonna, this is a setup. You're gonna be shot. You're gonna be robbed. And I'm like, I didn't know what to do. And I says, Marriott. He goes, no, hotel. And I realized he was in with some of these gang members. He was trying to get me to get out in this neighborhood. He'd take off and I'd be done. So fortunately, I had donated a bunch of money to the Unified Police Department in our area to help them buy a armored vehicle and some stuff like that. And as part of that, they made me an honorary colonel and gave me a badge with my name on it and stuff. So it happened to be in my bag, and I grabbed it out and I showed it to him. I said, Policia, Marriott, ahora. Police Marriott now. And he go, oh, so he turns and goes back to the Marriott, and we get to the Marriott, and there's guys out in front with fully automatic weapons that are guarding this area. I thought, wow, Now back up. The day before, when I got this call, an hour later, I received a phone call from my business partner, John, and John said, Paul, have you thought? I heard what you're thinking of doing, going down to Colombia to help rescue kids. He says his exact words were, Paul, have you thought this through? Right? He said, you're set. You could retire today. You could buy an island. You could be happy the rest of your life. And I said, John, would I really be happy if I bought an island, if I bought another plane, if I bought another helicopter? Would that really make me happy? I said, tell me this, if I was doing something else dangerous, if I was climbing Everest tomorrow, you and I would have the same conversation. He goes, yeah, we probably would. I said, and when I'm 95 years old and I'm looking back on my life, and I say I climbed this mountain and I built this multi-billion-dollar company and I helped rescue this many children from the most horrific things you can imagine, which of them really matters? And he said, yeah, Paul, I understand. If you've got something they need to rescue these kids. And he became one of our biggest supporters. Well, fast forward the next day, here I am in this fake taxi getting dropped off at this fake hotel with this. I thought, man, maybe John was right. Maybe I should have thought this through. Well, fortunately, I make it to the Marriott, coordinate with our team in Cartagena. We have the meeting with the guys who have the children the next morning. And so I fly in the next morning. I get picked up by two Navy SEALs, and these guys are just solid. And they have a fully armored car. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I really wasn't thinking this through beforehand when I'm getting in this random taxi. So then we go to this beach area, and there's this restaurant where there's a second story, and the traffickers are up on top and looking down. Now, fast forward 10 years later, I took my wife to that exact same restaurant. And as I walked in, I was overwhelmed. I just broke down sobbing, realizing that hundreds of millions of children who are safer now because of what we did with the movie, because of the missions that we did, and how everything started right there. But back at my first time, I couldn't break down with emotion. I was high on adrenaline. I'm like, these are real bad guys here. And the Navy SEALs get out of the car. They check out the area to make sure it's safe. They escort me in. Then I'm dressed like I'm the guy, that I'm going to fund that whole project. And I walk in and I'm thinking that these guys are I didn't know what guys like that looked like. I thought maybe they had tattoos on their necks and earrings in their noses and dreadlocks and looked like street thugs, right? The first one I met was a businessman, clean cut, well-spoken. The next one I met was a beautiful woman who ran a modeling agency. Now, if you've seen the movie Sound of Freedom, you kind of understand where some of this came from. She was running a fake modeling agency, and as part of that was luring these children into these horrific situations. And at first I thought, these aren't these aren't bad guys. They look like normal people. But we sat down and started that conversation, and it got dark. And when you're doing a business plan and the commodity, the product is children, it's the darkest conversation you can imagine. And halfway through the meeting, I'm sitting there, and the one of the guys, he was so excited I was willing to look at his hotel resort project for foreigners to come down and do these horrible things. He said, "Pablo, I have a gift for you." I said, "Really? What's your gift?" He leans forward and he hands me his phone. Shaun, there was a picture of an 11-year-old girl on that phone.
Mm.
He said, "This is Princess. She's still," he called her a 0-kilometer-mile model. You can figure out what that means. He said, "She's fresh. We just got some." He said, he started talking about these horrific things that we could do to that child. Now, this little girl in the movie Sound of Freedom is the one that we named Rocio. It was the one that we were trying to find while we were down there. In the movie, we took 8 different rescue missions and put them all together into one storyline. And I played a part in many of those rescue missions in different roles. Now, my first one in Cartagena, Colombia, I was the rich guy. I was the rich guy coming in to buy it. So in the movie Sound of Freedom, the producer of the movie, Eduardo Verástegui, plays the part of Pablo Delgado, the billion-dollar fund manager who quits his job to go help rescue children. And my character said to Jim Caviezel, "No, I'm sorry, I don't want to go. If the government isn't backing this thing, I can't do it." And it wasn't until he gave Eduardo and gave Pablo that picture. He gave my driver a picture, and that my driver, as I'm going somewhere in my tuxedo, it gives me that picture, and I see this picture of this 11-year-old girl, and that's what convinced me to go. In real life, I was already there. I was face to face with these guys in the darkest conversation you can imagine. And him handing me that picture, that galvanized my commitment to do whatever we needed to do, to put whatever money in I needed to help pull that child out of hell. And something he said made me realize he had more than her. I said, "Fuego," I said, you have more of these 0-kilometer-mile models? He goes, "Oh, yeah, we have 3 or 4 more." I said, "You're bringing those to the party too, right?" He goes, "Oh, no." He says, "They're too expensive." I said, "Too expensive? I'm paying this guy $25,000. We're paying him $550 per child. I mean, $500 per child for a minimum of 50 children, plus whatever tips on top of that." He says, "You already paid $25,000. He says, "You want to F these other young ones? It's going to cost you an extra 10,000. It's going to cost you 2,000 for this one, maybe 5,000 for that little one. It's going to cost you 10,000 more." Now, Shaun, at this point, I'm no acting involved. I'm legitimately pissed. This guy's talking about children as commodities with no remorse, no empathy, no compassion whatsoever. And me and my ego self at the time, I was running a multi-billion-dollar investment fund. I had a little bit of an ego. I had cufflinks that cost $2,000. I put my hands on my chest and I said, "You don't think I can afford $10,000? He said, "Oh, no, sorry, Jefe, and his stupid smile on his face. I said, "I want every one of your inventory, every one of them. I want them at the party, every one." I said, "And those ones, they better still be 0-kilometer. Nobody touches them. Do you understand? They're for me. They're not for you. You understand?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, Jefe, I understand." This stupid smile on his face. 2 weeks later, we fly back in. We meet with our team met with the U.S. Embassy and the Colombian federal agents. They provided 40 agents for us. Some of them were our maids and our waiters and our cooks. 25 were there to storm the party at the right time. These guys showed up with 54 children. Now, we have 3 different cities on the same day that were all tied together with the same different rings. More than 120 children and victims were rescued that day. More than 120. But I remember sitting there and seeing, now this was the first time he showed me that on his phone, that was the first time I saw what I knew was a child in that situation. But now these were live kids getting off this boat where we had rented this island, and they're getting off this boat, and I'm half of them, they had given them some substances that were just making them docile. And as we were negotiating, we have undercover cameras that were recording everything, so they could never say, "Oh, I thought this was a pool party." No, this you said on camera, this is what these kids were doing, right? And why they were here and what you were charging. So we get all this information. We order tequila, which is our sign for the federal agents to come in. They're supposed to come in within 2 minutes of ordering tequila. Well, we order the tequila, and our waiters and our maids, they get the stuff, but nobody comes. The agents don't come and storm the party. Well, the bad guys thought that this was the sign for the party to start. So 2 of them get up and they go in the house where the kids were, and we're sitting there waiting. Where are the agents? Where's the agents? Nobody came. 10, 15 minutes later, these guys bring these 0 kilometer miles. There was 4 kids, 3 girls and 1 little boy. This little boy was 11. They had taken him from Haiti. They gave him a white substance that morning so that he wouldn't cry. And everything in my body wanted to just hug these kids and say, "You're going to be fine. You're going to see your parents again." I shouldn't say that. And I'm sitting there, and they bring this little girl out. The same one that they showed me on the picture. The same little girl. Now, I'm sitting down. She's standing up. She's almost eye level with me as I'm sitting on a chair. There's a little kitty cat on her shirt. She's got red braids. She's 11. They had put makeup on her face, and it had been smeared because she had been crying. She was so scared of meeting us. And looking into her eyes, all I could see was fear. And I made a solemn promise to myself, to God, and to that little girl that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth. Then the most beautiful moment of my life came about half an hour later, after the agents came and stormed the party. Now, there was a whole delay thing. That's a whole other story about us having to delay because they weren't there, and a business plan, etc. But the most beautiful moment of my
Paul, please take us with the delay story.
Okay, I'll go there. This is they have these kids in front of us, and I told the guys who had brought the kids, I said, look, it's not time for the party yet. I said, you guys told me that you could provide the inventory, and my commitment to you was that I would fund your project, right? Now, we're just trying to delay. I mean, they bring these kids here. They want us to do horrible things. And I said, send the kids back in. I says, you bring out that white powder, you bring out these kids. We're going to have a great time for the next few hours, and I'm going to be effed up for the next few days. I said, why don't we do this? Instead, go get me a pen and a notebook. Let's draw out this business plan right now. You've proven to me that you could provide your end. Now, I'm nothing special, but I truly believe that it was divine intervention that I was there in that seat at that time, because I had negotiated hundreds of business deals in my lifetime. And this one was unlike anything that you can imagine. I pull out this thing and I'm just trying to delay for these until the agents get there, having no idea why they were delayed so long. It was 45 minutes from the time that we ordered tequila until the time the agents actually came. So, but I didn't know how long it was going to be. I just knew that we couldn't start the party. We couldn't have these kids out. And so I got the notebook out and I'm writing down and I said, okay, well, tell me how you want to design this project. Oh, okay, you're going to have this for your customers. Where you're going to keep the kids? Oh, you're going to keep them here. Okay, and how much? Oh, how much are you going to charge? Oh, $100,000. They were going to charge $100,000 for a membership to this resort, and then a bunch of extra money for extra services when people came. And I said, okay, well, let me understand the customer. I'm talking business stuff, right? Let me understand, how well do you know your customer of your current business model? Well, we know our customer really well. Who are they? Oh, they're rich men. There's guys from first world countries, guys from the US, guys from the UK that will go to second and third world countries and they'll engage in this. I'm like, well, is there enough to sustain what you're planning? And their business plan had tens of millions of dollars a year that they would make. That's how many customers. And I said, do you really have that many? And they said, yeah, literally every weekend. We send guys out into the city and they identify these guys who are looking for this kind of thing and they bring them in. He said, every weekend we can find them. And they're in popular tourist destinations around the world where these guys will tell their wives, oh, I'm going on a business trip with a bunch of guys at my work and we're going to Jaco Beach in Costa Rica. Yeah, we're going to go surfing. No, you're not. There's a lot more going on there than surfing, guys. And so, but they tell their wives this, they go to these places. So I realized, wow, these guys know their customer. They know what's going on. And there's a massive demand. Again, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's surpassed illegal arms, and it's now the second most profitable criminal industry in the world, second only to illegal drugs. And and it's soon going to surpass that. Why? You can sell a bag of white powder once. You can sell one of these innocent ones. You can sell them 10 and 20 times a day for 10 years. And so I'm negotiating this lab, and I'm like, okay, I'm sickened by the fact that there's that much demand, but I'm still trying to delay. So I'm like, okay, well, tell me about your product. It's a business plan. Let's talk about your product. Where are you getting your product? How much does it cost you? Oh, it's cost you $2,500 to be able to get a little girl from Latin America. What about one from the US? What about one from the UK? And what about a little blonde girl to bring her down here? What would that cost? Oh, that's going to be $25,000. Okay, and so we're getting all this information just sitting there designing this business plan, and then in the effort to try to delay, probably can't even tell this part on live. I'm going to tiptoe around it and let your audience try to understand what I'm saying, because we don't want to get shut down with how dark this story can go. I'm just telling you, let your imagination go, and it was that dark. This conversation was that dark. I asked them about the 0 kilometer mile models, the young 11-year-olds and stuff that were there. I said, you're charging me $2,500 to $5,000 for each one. Is that typical, or are you just charging me that because you think I've got money? Oh, no, we can get that. And then I said, well, then after that, does it go down to like 1,000 or 500? How much does it drop after that first time? And the female trafficker said, oh, no, we can sell them as a brand new model more than once. And I said, I couldn't understand. And she goes, well, she said, we have doctors that can sew up what is necessary to make them appear. And I couldn't breathe. I was I was so disgusted with how dark this conversation was. I'm telling you, Shaun, this world is so dark that you don't even want to think about it. But the only thing required for evil to flourish is for good people to do nothing. And we can sit back and we can say, oh, it doesn't happen. We can put our hands over our ears. We can turn off this channel now saying, I don't want to hear it. Or we can say, you know what? No. We're going to stand up. We're going to do something. We're gonna help the Child Liberation Foundation. You can literally $5 a month, guys, $5 a month. If you take everybody who's listening today and $5 a month, you're making a massive impact in fighting this. And a lot of parents, they'll leave the movie Sound of Freedom and they'll get mad. You know, some guy will be, oh, I used to be military. I want to do something. The worst thing you can do is go to Mexico and try to go undercover and rescue kids. You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot. The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children. And people are like, well, how does hugging my children, how is that going to fix trafficking? Well, here's the thing. The majority of children that get moved around, that get taken to other places, don't come from a healthy nuclear family. They come from runaways, a broken foster care program, or a broken family. So the more you can do to give your kids love and to hold them tight, the better you'll be in them moving around. Now, the biggest danger for your children, though, isn't standing behind a convenience store in a black alley. The biggest danger for our children is in their back pocket and in their backpack. It's their cell phone. Guys, predators everywhere. And I led more than 70 undercover missions, and many of these predators would use social media platforms to identify their victims and see where they were traveling and see when they were being vulnerable. If your kids have social media, okay, limit it to just their activities to just their real friends. You don't need the entire world to be able to log in and access exactly what your daughter is doing that afternoon. And put additional controls, especially, I mean, there's something that the FBI said is one of the greatest increased threats for our children this last couple of years, has been something called sextortion, where predators will go online and they will go onto these gaming platforms with your kids, and they'll pretend to be another child, your child's age. And then they'll start this conversation and they'll move that conversation offline, off of the gaming, off of Robles or whatever, and they'll move it over to a private, like Signal or WhatsApp or something like that. And in this private conversation, they'll then begin to get the kids to start sending pictures and then more graphic pictures. And pretty soon they'll say, okay, you know, now if you don't send me money, or if you don't meet at this place on Tuesdays, then these pictures are going to go all over the internet. Well, that wasn't another 12-year-old child. That was a 45-year-old dude who was targeting your child online. This happens all the time, guys, and I've seen it over and over again. In addition to that, you need a relationship with your children where they can very comfortably come to you and say, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I don't like it when you tell me to hug Uncle Harry because, you know, he touches me weird, or he says we should have secrets outside of you, or this babysitter, she tells us we should trust her more than you, and now she's showing us some naughty videos online. Or I don't like going to this friend's house because her brother was taking pictures of us when we're changing, and now he says that he's gonna show them to all of the kids at school unless we do other things with him and his friends. These are grooming behaviors, and it's incredibly common. Over 90% of children who go through this degree of darkness and pain in their life, over 90% of them, it was familial. What parents don't understand is that there's a huge percentage of children who are sold for S that sleep in their own beds at night, and their parents don't even know. So having that healthy relationship with your kids early on when they're little, And you're like, oh, I'll talk to them about the birds and the bees when they're 14, when they're no, at 5 years old, you need to teach them where their privates are. You need to teach them that these are things that nobody gets to touch and nobody gets to ask to show things, because many times they don't even know. And again, 1/4 of men who had gone through SA is 1/4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old in their own homes or in their neighborhood. And so this is where we have to stop it. And why is this so important? I recognize after 10 years of being in the darkness, of seeing the darkest part of humanity, I recognize that the majority of guys who were selling these victims were sold themselves when they were children. Hurt people hurt other people. And if you've gone through that darkness, that heaviness, now the majority of my undercover operators had gone through that darkness, and they turned it into light. They turned it into, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to protect innocence. But for many people, it eats them alive. It comes out in,
Paul,
go ahead.
Let's go back to the day of the rescue then. You said there was the delay, and then these guys come in. What happens next?
Well, I finally, after 45 minutes of delaying with this business plan from hell, finally, agents come in from all directions, and have got their guns drawn, and this is the first time that I had live guns pointed at me, and would continue many, many, many times. Some of them from good guys, some of them from bad guys over the next 10 years. But they came in and they threw us all on the ground. I remember laying there on the sand. I had ants crawling over me, but I was so incredibly grateful to not be in that dark conversation anymore. And the traffickers were separated from us. The guys, the kids were separated from us, and they then took them off on a boat. Now they handcuffed us too. The bad guys think that we were extradited to the U.S. to stand trial, right? So we're getting arrested as well. And then 30 child protective services people came in with the children, and we were laying there on the ground, and they had taken the bad guys away, and then I had gone in. There was a little place of the house that we had our luggage and stuff in, and our bags, that you could hear. It was kind of a grass roof type of a building, and you could hear over the wall. You could hear what was going on in the other room perfectly. And I was in there with Scott, one of the other operators, and we could hear in the other room the child protective services people with the kids, and they were calming them down. They were laughing, and they were singing with the children. And that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard, especially compared to the crying that we heard less than 45 minutes before. And I started crying. I couldn't keep it in. And as we were being escorted off the island, I told one of the other agents, I said, bro, I've spent my whole life making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. I want to be a part of this. What can I do? I was doing pretty well in my business. I actually had a white Aventador Lamborghini convertible with the doors that go up on the side that I had on my vision board, that I had identified when I was going to buy that spring. And I told him, I'm not going to buy that car. I want to give you the money instead. I want to help. What can I do? And he said, Paul, he said, sadly, there's a large percentage of the demand for this that comes from, he said, don't take this wrong. He said, it comes from guys like you. Money, arrogance, greed, lust. He said, I wasn't doing anything illegal. I was helping kids with the charity work that I was doing, but I was having parties at my house every other weekend with NBA, NFL players and wealthy guys and half-dressed girls. And, it was it wasn't anything like a P. Diddy party, we were, but it was still playing in that energy of lust and arrogance. And this was a huge transformation to me in recognizing where it went. And he said, Paul, he said, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. So for the next year, I went in not as Paul Hutchinson. I went in as Paul Stone. It was funny. My personal assistant, I told her, I need you to take down everything online about the real me, everything. I can still be on the board of the company and stuff, but I need to not have my picture out there. Nothing. I said, and I there's a million Pauls in the world, so I want to still be Paul on these undercover missions, but create a whole new profile called Paul Johnson. And she's all sitting there typing, and she stops and she goes, you have a chance to redefine yourself and you're going to be Paul Johnson. She said, how about Paul Stone? So she creates this whole profile. But so Paul Stone was this wealthy playboy that she created this profile for online with social media accounts and everything. And that was the profile for the next year, as these guys were on the ground using that as the bait to have them come to these things and bring the kids. And we did a bunch of rescues. And then after a year, one of the operators, he said, Paul, we have to move things around, where the foundation I was working at the time couldn't do the dark undercover deep cover work. He said, you're really good at talking to these guys and you've got some skills. He said, are you interested in doing the deep cover, going on the ground 2 a.m. downtown Mexico City, downtown Port-au-Prince, Haiti? He said, in connecting with the traffickers firsthand. And that's when the stories got super dangerous and super dark. And I continued for the next 8 years in running undercover child rescue missions in the darkest, most dangerous places in the world, seeing the darkest part of humanity and what comes from people who choose that energy of lust and greed and arrogance and choose to unheal their trauma.
Paul, these rescues then, did you actually get to meet the kids and hear their stories as to how they'd ended up in captivity?
Absolutely. Yeah, many.
Do you have a few examples, perhaps?
So one time, Port-au-Prince, Haiti is right now is the most dangerous city on the planet by far. There's nothing even close. There's nowhere in the Middle East that's close. Nowhere in the world is as close as Port-au-Prince, Haiti, in terms of the death rate, murder rate, et cetera. And I did 12 undercover child rescue missions in Haiti to take down some of the largest child rings in the Caribbean. And one of them, I was tired of the continuing to surface. We wanted to take the head off the dragon. And so we needed to work our way up to the top, whatever that was. Now, this one, the top, ended up being corrupt federal judges that were involved. So, all the way up, right? So on the way up that ladder, we had connected with what I call a level 3 trafficker. This is the ones who physically hold the children in captivity. And this was a female. Her name was Cho. And big, heavy-set lady, had been doing these horrible things for almost 2 decades now. And her thugs had connected with us and took us to her. This was a dark area of town. This was 2 a.m. in a place called Patientville, just outside of Port-au-Prince. Super, incredibly dangerous area. And there was this door. It was a red door. It was about 4 feet wide, 4 or 5 feet wide, and 7.5, 8 feet tall, big door. And she sticks a key in this door, and it's steel. It's red. It opens up, kind of rusted on the side, and enter into this hallway. It's kind of dirt on the floor. It's dimly lit with cobwebs on the side, and then on the left-hand side, and I've got videos of this from later. On the left-hand side were multiple doors that were Shaun, they were cell doors is the best way. There was no windows outside of just these small steel doors. They were little 2 feet doors, and she opens the first one, and there's a room. It's about 5 feet wide and about 6 feet deep. So less than 2 meters by 2 meters. And there was it wasn't even a bed. It was a steel plank that was held to the wall with a chain, so you could kind of lift it up out of the way. And there was a dirty, dingy little blanket that was sitting on this steel plank. And to the left was a concrete block. And there was a little girl sitting on that concrete block. Now, this little girl, we'll call her Esther. 7 years before, she was in a healthy family. The earthquake happened in Haiti. Massive destruction, massive chaos. And this happens everywhere, whether it's a war-torn country or a catastrophe like an earthquake, wherein as soon as there's massive civil unrest and disruption, the traffickers see it as an opportunity. This little girl was 7. Her parents were killed in the earthquake. Nobody knew she was even alive. Perfect opportunity for these guys to take her. They took this little girl, and she was sold every day, 10, 20 times a day for 7 years. Now, what makes me mad is that every single man who walked in those doors for 7 years was there to harm her, was there to steal her innocence again and again. It's a man by the name of Andy McCubbins and myself. Andrew McCubbins is an incredible hero. He had done 22 undercover missions with me. Because of the work that he was doing to fight trafficking, some previous administrations had targeted him with a federal probe on his business, trying to take him down and defame him. He was there with me in the most dangerous place in the world. And after 7 years, we were the first ones to walk through that door that didn't have that intention. That little girl, she didn't say one word for 2 weeks after she was rescued. The very first words she said was, I didn't think anybody would come. Because she had given up hope. She had given up hope 6, 7 years before. Every child has a story like that. Some come from healthy homes like she did. Others come from broken homes, from extreme poverty. And the only way we're going to fix this is we've got to heal humanity. We've got to take away the demand, because as long as there is continually a demand, as long as men take a woman from a divine feminine to an object with their online things that they're doing that they think are private. No, the second that a man takes a woman to that energy of being an object, he starts going down a dark road and contributing to the problems that create so much pain. I had to realize that if I wanted to change the world, I needed to change the man in the mirror. So many times we look out there, we say, fix this, that, this law needs to change, this guy needs to go to jail. But every one of us need to recognize the ripple effect of our actions, of every action. You know, I remember many times where I would go into work not having fixed whatever stuff I needed to fix inside. Maybe I was having some problems with my relationship at home, or you know, traffic was bad or whatever, and I'm unkind to one of my new employees, and I'm super short with him, and I yell at him for something just trivial. And there's something called trauma transfer, where he goes home, now he yells at his wife, and his wife then yells at the son, and the son kicks the dog, right? That the kicking of that dog literally came from me being out of integrity because of that trauma transfer. Now, let's just pretend like that. What I didn't realize is that that man, that employee at work, that he had some really heavy things that he dealt with as a child. And let's say that he made lots of bad decisions after that darkness that he experienced. And let's say that some of those decisions were an addiction online that got worse and worse, that he ended up looking at things that were more and more and more inappropriate. And let's say that then beyond that, he was drinking and his wife left him. And now this is the weekend that he gets his 11-year-old daughter as visitation with her cousin. Now that trauma transfer of me being out of integrity didn't just kick a dog. It hurt a child. Every one of us needs to look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do to heal what I need to heal, to release whatever happened to me of my past, to forgive others, forgive myself, to step into that highest and best version of me? What needs to happen to make the world a better place? That's the only way we're going to fix it, because we're not going to have everyone listening to us try to go into Port-au-Prince, Haiti and pull these kids out of the darkness. We need to ask ourselves what we're doing to contribute.
So, Paul, many of the viewers are in tears right now in the live chat. They just cannot believe what you've just described from your own personal experience. One of the viewers has asked, you know, these kids are so young. How can their bodies even cope with these horrible things? And do some of them die?
Yes. Yeah, again, in Port-au-Prince, one of the operations that I was a part of was rescuing children that were part of I don't know if I can say this online, an organ operation where,
yeah.
So they were deemed as no longer viable for the S operation, and thereby were taken to one that would sell parts of them. And I thought, where does humanity have to be where any of this is okay? And one of the guys that was with me was a doctor. He was a trauma surgeon that was also military. And I asked him, I said, you know, part of me understands how guys who look at inappropriate things now go down this dark road, and pretty soon they're fantasizing about something they wouldn't have thought was attractive 5 years ago, and younger, whatever. I said, where does the demand for this? Do people really know that this is where this transplant is coming from? And he said this. He said, Paul, he said, there's a huge, he said less than 10%, I don't know the numbers today, but he said less than 10% of the organ recipients in around the world, less than 10% of them have the proper paperwork as to where they came from at the time of receiving. He said, because things have to move very quickly and everything else. He said, now, that's not saying that all of them come from places like this. He said, but, you know, you're a wealthy family, your daughter needs a heart transplant, she's going to die, and you're 273rd on the list in a first world country like the UK or the US. He said, what do you do? Well, you realize that for $20,000, $30,000, you can go to Mexico and you can be number one on the list. Well, the kids in Mexico that are giving up their hearts probably don't have donor cards or parents that You don't know where it came from, and it creates a massive demand. So yeah, it gets really dark. And some of them end up going into trafficking themselves. And the Child Liberation Foundation, you can find the link on the thing. We've realized a lot of the safe houses we work with these children, it's not just about giving them some psychological help and some of the healing that we do. It's also about teaching them some life skills that can give these children the ability to have a life outside of selling their bodies as they get older. Because sadly, a lot of them go back into that if they're not given the help, the love, the healing, the family structure that they need.
Yeah, one of the most common questions coming in is, when these kids are rescued, what happens next?
Well, if the parents reported them taken, then it's easy to find them and easy to get them back. If they didn't, sometimes the parents were involved. In Southeast Asia, more than half of the children that we rescued were sold by their own families, and you can't put them back in that kind of a situation. We were there less than a year ago in Thailand, where the Child Liberation Foundation was partnering with some of the other foundations that were there, and one of the foundations, they had a little girl. She was 10. Her parents had both decided that she should be the breadwinner for the family, that they could both retire and allow their 10-year-old to sell herself to provide financially for the family. Now, what do you do in a situation like that? Now you got to pull them out, of course, and the you can't just take them out of hell and put them in another hell. A lot of orphanages and foster care programs are wrought with abuse. In the U.S. alone, 40% of the kids who are runaways from some of these foster care programs get erased off of the ledgers, deleted, so they don't have to worry about putting in the resources to find them. And some of them, many of them, are abused within that environment. We have another sister foundation that we work with and we help fund that's in Latin America. It's in Guatemala. That the model that we help with is they'll bring in a family, a mom and a dad and a child who maybe the dad just lost his job. They're literally on the streets or getting ready to be on the streets. They're out. And they'll say, okay, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring you into this. They bought this big, huge piece of property, and donors are part of our money goes into helping to build these small little houses for them. And they said, as a family, you're going to come in, we're going to give you a house. We're going to give you a job on the ranch, on the farm, on this little community, and we're going to give you 3 more children. These kids were taken from horrible places. They're going to have psychological help and therapy every day, but we need to have them in a healthy, loving family environment that has been vetted to make sure that they're in a safe place. And so, finding families, and that's what's difficult. It costs, just to adopt some children from Haiti costs somewhere between $30,000 to $70,000 because there's so much red tape involved. So trying to find healthy families that can help raise these kids. This little girl that I told you about, that her parents were killed in the earthquake. It took some time to identify some other family members, but now she's going to school. She's learning to dance. She's in a healthy family. And these children recover. Ironically, when they came out of a situation of abuse like that, you can immediately get them the help, the loving, the healing tools that they need. The challenge comes when it's somebody in your own neighborhood with your own child, or a relative and an uncle, a grandfather that says, hey, don't tell anybody or else this is going to happen. And now you're burying that. It's kind of like a big cut on your arm. If you bury it, you cover it up, it gets infected, it affects your whole body, and 10 and 20 years later, you're holding on to this trauma. It's literally a deeper, heavy lift work to help a 30, 40-year-old. And this is what we do with Liberating Humanity. Our retreats that we run are for people who are carrying heavy trauma that comes out with anxiety and depression and PTSD and addictive behaviors and things like this, that if we can help them release those things that happened when they were 7 or 8 years old, and we're very incredibly effective at it. My first company in my 20s, that's what it did, is help people overcome those things. And so that's our whole focus today, is helping to heal humanity so we don't pass that trauma on.
Paul, it seems that there are different ways these kids end up with these monsters. Are there techniques that these monsters use to trick parents into getting the kids away from them?
Yeah, there's like I say, the easiest ones are where the parents aren't looking for them. A runaway, a broken home, broken foster care program. Those are the easiest targets. And that's why it's so important to do things to hold a nuclear family together and keep your kids safe. But for families that are together, yes, the most common ways are digital today in connecting with your kids online. Those are very, 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 very common. And any kind of grooming, where we tell the kids that if anybody ever says anything, that this should be a secret that your parents can't know, or this is our secret, that's a red flag immediately. Tell your 5-year-old, if any adult ever uses the word, don't tell your parents, or this is our secret, that is a red flag. That's a runaway. That's a scream, mommy, help me. They just said this is our secret. That's a huge red flag. And then beyond that, any adult that is getting too physical with your child, lots of sit on my lap and tickle you and in private places and whatever, just say, hey, that's something that, we've talked about with our kids, that I'm not saying that you're doing anything bad by cuddling and tickling my 7-year-old, but at the same time, we have some barriers here. Another thing is sleepovers. Guys, I can't tell you how often these things happen with an older brother or a parent of another person at a sleepover or slumber party at other people's houses. Make sure you're vetting who your kids are with in those situations. And again, they use blackmail, they use manipulation, they use fear tactics to control the kids and say, bad things will happen. We tried to depict this in the Sound of Freedom movie with the little boy who the perpetrator was like, hey, you don't want something bad to happen to your sister, do you? No, well, then you're going to do exactly what I say. We had a little girl, she was 12. She was taken from Mexico City. She was taken to New York, and she was told by the people who took her, she was told, we know where your mother works. We know where your sister goes to school. These things that are happening to you, they're going to happen to them as well. We're going to do horrible things to them. If you say anything, if you do anything, if you try to run away, if you whatever, you're going to be fully compliant. And she was for years. And finally, at 17 years old, she ran away. They caught her, beat her up, brought her back in. We have certification programs now for doctors. The Child Liberation Foundation has certification programs because 80% of children during these situations end up being taken to the doctor because they were beat up by their own captors. And so she was beat up. She had to go to the hospital. They didn't know what to look for. And so, of course, she was released and she was back in the game again. At 18, she saw an advertisement that one of our sister foundations that we helped fund had online that had a phone number that was easy to memorize. If you're being in this situation, call. So the next time she was at a hotel with a John, she went into the bathroom where there was a phone in there. She had the number to memorize. Boom, she made a phone call, boom, We were able to get her out. And she had been there since she was 12. She was now 18. This was 6 years. And I asked her. She came and we were helping her transition into a new family, and she came to our house over Christmas. And I asked her, I said, tell me this. I said, you've been in this work for 6 years. You're now 18. And I said, the girls that are online on these online profiles that say they're independent, back then there was Backpage and other stuff. I said, are the ones that say they're independent, they're just raising money to put their kids through school or whatever, are they? Oh, I said, what percentage of them are really independent and which ones of them are being controlled? Is it like really 50%? She said, oh no. She said, it's more like 90 to 95% of them. She said, even in the online pictures and video industry, the porn industry, she said, those guys, it's a huge percentage of them that are not independent. They are being the T word that we can't say online. They are being controlled. They are being sold. And it's important to understand that if you're engaging in those, consuming those things, you're contributing to the problem.
Are there techniques that these transporters of kids use to get them across international borders?
Absolutely. We depicted some of them in the movie Sound of Freedom. There are kids that get pushed across borders in container ships. They absolutely are. In fact, there a lot of these port cities are in the U.S. and in the U.K. A lot of these port cities are the ones who have the highest problem with the T word, with traffic, and it's because of the fact that that's where they're coming in. They were also brought across the U.S. For example, the open border for a period of 4+ years, a few years ago in the U.S. This should have never been a political discussion. This isn't a right or left issue. This was a human movement, especially children issue. There was 130,000 children a year average that were brought across that open border without parents, without documentation, unaccompanied minors. And here's what happened every single day over those 4 years. Every single day in countries throughout all of Latin America, children were taken from healthy families. I didn't say wealthy families, I said healthy families, right? They had a mom and a dad, but they didn't have the resources to do anything to follow up on where that child was. They were immediately given substance. They were immediately taken advantage of. They were then told that I know where your mom lives and everything else. They were controlled through fear. They were taken up to the border, and they were given a phone number and an address of somebody that had no relation to them whatsoever. And they were told by the guys who took them, listen, you say anything, something's going to happen to your family. But wherever home you end up in, you run away from that home and you end up in this, making this call to this phone number or this address. And now they're in the hands, they're moved across that border. Hundreds of thousands of them are still missing. The US State Department admitted a year and a half ago that there was over 200,000 of these children that they have no idea where they are, no idea whatsoever.
Wow. Paul, we've got tons of questions have come in, and I know we're nearly at an hour and a half right now. Are you okay to stay on and answer some more questions?
I'm good, my friend. I'm good.
All right. So, Anne-Marie wants to know, can you share with us the most shocking incident you have come across and the most monstrous person? Thank you.
Well, the most shocking incident, there's a lot of shocking ones, but the one where I spoke about earlier, where the perpetrator said that they just need a doctor to sew back what was torn to be able to sell them as a new model again. That was horrific. Beyond that, the thing that was most surprising to me was how deep this goes, how prevalent it is in every country. I can literally go in, if you in any city Any city in the world, I could go in with less than a half an hour. I could find kids that were being sold. Any city in the world. It was appalling. Literally, you could, beyond that, just the challenges that our kids face in our own neighborhoods. The fact that you could, when I recognized that you could walk out on your front porch, whether you're in an affluent neighborhood or whether you're in an apartment complex, you walk out your front door and you look left and you look right, there's a very high chance that one of those doors is a dangerous place for children, which is why it's so important for us to have that healthy relationship with our kids to keep them safe. Now, from a danger situation, yeah, I've been in some doozies. Now, in the movie Sound of Freedom, we took about 20 different operators and about 8 different missions and compiled them all together into one storyline. And the time that we made it, most of us as undercover operators were still undercover, so we couldn't be known. We had one that was a Homeland Security agent that he was like, hey, I don't want to do undercover anymore. I want to be public. And so we kind of put a lot of attention there. But the truth is, it was another agent that was there when the little boy came across the border. That the little girl was actually rescued there in the island. The jungle scene was an entirely different country. And I talk about that in the Sound of Freedom book. I go through the different stories that were all brought together, and that the jungle scene was actually myself and Andy, who I talked about earlier, who had gone in there into this jungle area that was halfway between Port-au-Prince and the Dominican side, where the closest police station was 10 hours away. It was a 5-hour drive and a 5-hour horse ride or hiking just to get into this region. And these people were bringing children in from the cities nobody was looking for them in this region. They were having them do their growing of their substances that were there. And there was a little boy that was 4 years old when he was taken. His father was serving as a pastor in a church in one of the cities, and the people thought that since he was a pastor, he probably had money, so they took his little boy, demanded money, he paid it. Then he never saw his little boy again. And we were on the trail trying to find that little boy. More than 100 children we rescued, just pursuing the leads for that little boy. And our final leads ended up taking us into this jungle region where these guys had brought kids in from the city that were under just horrific conditions that were out there. And we had some teams of some Green Berets and Navy SEALs who tried to go in, but they were chased out with pitchforks and machetes. And we thought, okay, we've got to figure out how to get into this area. We can't just go in shooting everybody. And so they had me go in and pose as a doctor to set up a clinic in the area where we would we sent some scouts in before that said, hey, we want these doctors to come in to test the children to see if they are how healthy they are and some of the diseases that are going on. And so then myself and Andy went in dressed as doctors into this region and got some it was so dangerous that the head of the federal police, his top security guys who drove us to the edge of that region, we got to the edge of it and they said, sorry, we can't go anymore. It's way too dangerous in there. We're not letting you go. And we're like, this is why we came, is to go in there. I realized after a bit, this was their own ego. They were scared to death of going in there. And so how do we get in there? Well, we have to make sure that they felt good. So I just told them, look, you guys stay here and watch the car, and you stay by the radio in case something happens. And so Andy and I went in and saw the darkness firsthand, and were able to help get a bunch of those kids out.
And did you get the target kid out?
No, sadly we didn't. You know what? I have another one that your audience, one of the saddest and darkest, buckle up for this one. This was in Dominican Republic. I had connected with a a guy who was an escaped convict from the US who was doing horrific things to kids in that region. And he had brought a bunch of victims, and then he gets me on the phone. He brings a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. And he said, now these ones are special. He said, these ones aren't just for one night. He said their mother wants to be done with them. She's selling them for $10,000 each. And you can just take them to Miami and sell them in one of your clubs that are there. And he said, but she wants to talk to you on the phone. So I get on the phone with this mother. And she said, I want you to make me a promise. Now, I thought that maybe she would say, make sure that they're well fed and that they're not physically hurt in this process. That's what I thought that maybe she was going to say. Shaun, this mother said, I want you to make me a promise. If you're ever done with them, I need you to be done with them. I don't want this ever to come back on me. If you're ever not going to use them in your club, they need to not be alive. And I thought, how does any mother get to the point where they knowingly, number one, knowingly sell their children into this kind of situation? And number two, so far removed from any moral foundation that she would say, if you're ever done with them, I need you to be done with them. Absolutely, this is not, I recognize this was not a war of flesh and blood. This is a war against darkness, the principalities of darkness that are in the highest levels of our world. This is what we are battling. It's light against darkness all day long that allows a mother to get to that point.
Diana's saying, what compels people to be this evil?
I think it's a slow, slippery slope that is tied to the very things that I saw right in the beginning with the traffickers and even with myself, with arrogance and greed and lust. Again, the slippery slope of somebody innocently, quote unquote, saying, okay, what I do in my privacy of my own office on my computer by myself with what I'm looking at, that's not hurting anyone. I can stop anytime. No, you can't. Give it up for a year, dude. And tell me you can stop you need to make a concerted effort to release that. Well, it's not getting worse. Yes, it is getting worse. It probably started out with a swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated, and then it ended up with a Victoria's Secret model magazine, and then it ended up with just top pictures, and then it ended up with full body pictures, and then it ended up with videos, and then it continues to progress. Anytime there is something that is addictive like that, like substances or things online, those things are not spiritually fulfilling, and therefore continue to drag you deeper and deeper. And for some of them, deeper is more grotesque things or forced videos. Other ones, it's a little bit younger and a little bit younger. And pretty soon they're fantasizing about things they wouldn't have even thought was attractive 5 years ago. And then they're acting out on these horrific fantasies. Guys, this is the world that we live in, and it starts even with our movies and the things that we allow into our homes, our conversations. We have to pay close attention to all of it, because it's people who are unhealed that hurt other people. And so healed people can heal the world. If you're holding on to that heavy trauma, talk about it. Guys, most guys are like, oh, I don't want to talk about what happened when I was 8 because, You know, that thing that happened with my uncle. If I do, I'll be less of a man. No, you won't. You were 8. That was a horrible thing that happened with somebody who was holding on to some heavy, deep trauma. The best thing you can do is talk about it, because in doing so, it takes the chances of you ever passing it on way, way, way down. Just talk about it. Get some help. Go to liberatinghumanity.com and find the tools that you can use to release the heavy trauma, to release the things that don't serve the highest and best version of you.
Paul, you got a few people asking regarding these stories where parents were involved selling the kids. Were there any consequences for the parents?
Yes, if they were directly involved. Sadly, there are parents who here's the thing. Let's just go to Thailand again. There was a lot of parents who their children, they were in deep poverty. They didn't have enough money to feed their kids. They've got 5 kids, and somebody comes in and says, listen, you give us one of these kids, we'll give you X amount of money. Your other kids are gonna be fed well. She's gonna be taken care of. She's gonna be working in a brothel. Who knows? Maybe she'll be well fed. Who knows? Maybe some rich European is gonna fly in and see her in the brothel and fall in love with her and take her home and have a better life. Whatever it is, right? These parents knowingly give up their kids in some pretty heavy situations that a lot of us can't even relate to. But yes, in every way, if any parent is found to be involved with this, then they are prosecuted. In fact, it's interesting. We've been working the last 10 plus years in changing a lot of laws throughout the world. With the movie Sound of Freedom, there's such a movement wherein good people everywhere are recognizing that this is a problem, that they are demanding that their government leaders do something, that they change the laws in terms of the prosecution of any parent that's involved, especially if a father was involved in abuse in any way, to remove him from that situation, to put him behind bars, to lengthen the sentences when necessary. Because sadly, you could, in the U.S. a few years ago, you'd go to jail longer for having a pocket full of green plants than you would than you would in doing something horrible to a child. And so it was important that we help change laws and policies, and we also have certification programs that the Child Liberation Foundation has put together that for teachers to know when parents are doing these things to the kids, teaching the teachers how to identify it so that we can bring in authorities, also with doctors and people in hospitality to identify those situations. Because again, there are so many times where a child in these situations are taken to a hospital, and if a doctor doesn't know what to look for, then he can't identify the fact that even if the mother was the one that brought them into the hospital, that maybe there's something they need to look deeper into.
Got a question from Dan. What are the most common behavioral red flags that an observant person should look for in public spaces, and what is the best way to deal with the situation?
Well, again, if you see something, say something. We've had this in airports all around the U.S. If you're seeing, now a lot of people are like, what is see something? Well, if you see a child who is very obviously being controlled through fear, they're very, very compliant, they're very, very quiet, they're looking down, they're having no conversations, they don't have access to their cell phones and whatnot. The adult that is with them looks different from that child, and is being overly, now there's a fine line, because now parents are like, well, I'm going to be a helicopter mom, I'm going to follow my child into the bathroom and make sure that they're okay, and so it's an energetic thing. I have I have a book that I'm working on called Are You Listening with My Hand on My Heart? Not Are You Listening with My Hand on My Ear, but Are You Listening Here on My Heart? And every one of the undercover missions, I have so many stories about how we weren't following logic and protocol. We were literally being led to where those children were and what we needed to do to keep our kids safe and get them out. You can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it intuition, you can call it whatever you want to. There's a higher power very interested in keeping these children safe. And if we tune in to that energy, you'll be able to know that will be your clearest sign. More than what you can see, it will be what you feel. And there were so many times where, I mean, I had one in Ecuador where the federal agents had identified, they had gotten a tip where there was an illicit operation that was going on that was selling these kids that had there was a place that you could do your hair and nails. It was a spa type of a thing with a massage place that was kind of in the back. And so we were in the car and they drove and they come up to the place where it was supposed to be. And the federal agent, he goes, oh, damn. He says it shut down. It's gone. This was the address where it's supposed to be. It's gone. They must have gotten the tip. And immediately I could feel it. I said, no, stop. He goes, stop. I said, no, stop right now. Stop. He said, what? It's gone. I said, no, stop. They're still here. And I got out of the van. Petter gets out. He's a Green Beret and a couple of my operators. And we go around the back of the van and I just close my eyes, take a deep breath in through my nose, and I hold it for a second. And I just go from my head to my heart space. This is how you do it, guys. Super simple. Deep breath in, close your eyes, get rid of all of the distractions, focus on your heart. And from that place could feel what I needed to do next. I then go up to the restaurant that's by there and I talk to the manager. I said, hey, there's supposed to be a massage place here. As it's gone. He goes, would you have an appointment? I freaking knew that place still existed, right? I goes, no, I don't. He goes, oh, I don't want to talk about it. So I go out in front and again, close my eyes, deep breath in, focus on the heart, open my eyes. And the first thing I'm drawn to is this woman who is walking her dog. I walk up to her, pull out a $20 bill. I said, hey, can you help me with something? I've heard that there's something here. And undercover, I kind of lie sometimes. I said, I have an appointment for a special massage here. And she goes, oh. And she looks at me. And of course, I'm dressed the part. I've got this hat on that says effers upside down. I've got this big chain on. I've got a shirt that, it has a picture of a doctor that says, I'm no gynecologist, but I'll take a look. I mean, I look like just a piece of S, right? And she goes, oh, okay. And so she calls this lady, and sure enough, they open these big steel doors, and we get led back into this place, and we're able to take down that entire operation. But it's all tuning in. Now, say something to someone. It's better to tell an authority, hey, this doesn't look right, and have them go check it out, and it just happens to be an overly protective dad. That's okay. If you're an overly protective dad and somebody comes to you and says, hey, I just want to make sure this child's okay, thank them. Thank them for being the type of person who is protecting kids. And so being able to just tune in so you can really feel if something's out of place, and then saying something to an authority that is there that they can go and have that conversation. Most airlines have people that are trained on the airlines to be looking for kids in this situation and know what to say and what to do.
So I was thinking this as well. I mean, listening to you, Paul, my head just was about to explode at several moments. The viewers have been in tears. And this is just hearing your account of it. You've lived this for years. And one of the viewers is wondering, how do you protect yourself from falling apart? I mean, you're dealing with a lot of dark energy, meeting these monsters and listening to the kids' harrowing stories. How do you keep yourself sane?
In the beginning, I didn't. Well, we were going through operators. I had Green Berets with 300 missions in Afghanistan that already had PTSD. And one mission with us, seeing a menu presented with children's faces and prices of things that you could order. it just took them over the top. They're just, I just cannot deal with how dark this world was. And we were losing operators. And so for me, one blessing I had was my company in my early 20s that helped people overcome anxiety and depression and PTSD and stuff. It was using something called cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive restructuring. But it took us 12 weeks, 1 to 2 hours a day with a personal coach to have some real long-term change. About 10 years ago, I got a phone call from 2 of my operators, and they said, "Paul, do you trust us?" And I said, "Yeah, I trust you with my life." Literally, undercover, I'm in charge of talking. They're in charge of making sure I don't die, right? They said, "You need to come to this healing retreat." And my exact words were, "I don't need to heal. I'm Paul effing Hutchinson. Everybody wants to be me, right?" Now, understand this, at the time, I had a home with 10 bathrooms, 8 private suites, 3 kitchens, 7 fireplaces, a basketball court in my basement. I had parties every other weekend. I was doing the undercover work, but I was also still playing in that space of arrogance and greed and unhealed trauma that I needed to work on. And now this is important for listeners to understand, because the laws will be changing in the next 2 years in the US and thus throughout the world in some of these areas. In the late 60s, President Nixon in the US threw a whole bunch of things under the bus and called them Schedule I substances. Okay, and you can look into what they are. Sadly, some of them were incredibly effective in the right areas in helping people break free of anxiety and depression and PTSD and addictions, etc. And so I was introduced at this point to some doctors and some scientists who had identified the proper use, guys, this is so important, the proper protocol of psychedelics when it comes to trauma therapy. Now, I'm not a fan whatsoever of somebody getting some mushrooms and going to getting high with their friends at a rave party. That's not only a bad idea, it's dangerous, right? Here's what happens. There's something called neuroplasticity. When we're little kids, our brain is very, very impressionable. 0 to 9 years old, we can learn 3 or 4 languages at the same time that we're learning how to eat and ride our bike and everything else. And if you imagine a gold bar, this gold bar is our subconscious mind, and our subconscious mind controls 95% of our life. And only a small percentage is our conscious mind. Well, our subconscious mind in neuroplasticity is flow state, that gold bar. But after 9 or 10 years old, it kind of hardens and in whatever shape it's in. And if something happened when we were young, sometimes things get deeply embedded in that gold bar. Our uncle does something horrible, even something simpler. Our dad says you look ugly in blue. Whatever it is, we're gonna hold that energy, and it's gonna affect our entire life. Now, fast forward, we're 20 years old. We've gone through many, many relationships. We can't hold a healthy one together, and we don't realize, well, it's probably because of what happened when you were 7. You're holding on to that trauma, and it's creating these cycles in your relationships, or you have substances that are negatively affecting your life, and a lot of it's because of unhealed things that you need to release. And so that first experience for me was the most beautiful, horrific experience of my life. Horrific because the plants that I was given by this trained facilitator took me to a place with the right intention, the professional facilitators that were there, but it took me to a place of pure empathy. I felt in every cell of my body, I felt the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom, as if I was them. It was so heavy. It was so dark. And I felt like Satan himself had his foot on my chest, and I was 600 miles in the dirt. And then the facilitator helped me. I changed the playlist to what I call my Jesus list. It was this beautiful music that was pulling me out, and I could feel all this crap pulling off of me. And then I said to myself, have you learned your lesson yet? Probably not. So switched it back, and then I felt the joy of the children that we helped to rescue as if I was them, but I also felt the ripple effect of my negative actions. The man who came to my party, who slept with a cheerleader, broke up his marriage, and now all of a sudden, a year later, his daughter ends up getting abused by the new boyfriend of the mom, or the son ends up being addicted to something because of the fact that guy was at my party, because I was living in a place that wasn't in integrity. And so it was so transformational to me that we started paying for some, we started doing some deep research on it. We started bringing in women who dealt with, and in the beginning, it was just our operators, helping them simply release all that negative energy, meditation every day, praying every day. It was the only way to be a light in that darkness, because the darkness was so heavy, was so dark, that the emotional trauma for me and most of our operators was the hardest thing to deal with. And so those are the tools that we use.
Well said, Paul. Viewers, this is going to be one of the most important interviews we've ever done. I would urge people, because YouTube shadow bans this kind of stuff, if you could share it, give it a like at least, leave a comment. That helps the engagement. If you want to support Paul, all of his links are in the description box. Paul, oh my God, I don't know where to begin. We salute your bravery, for starters. So many people make money and they just kick back, and I don't even want to get into that. What would you like to say in conclusion to the viewers, my friend?
I'm going to end with this story, a little short one. There was a man sitting on a couch, and his little boy walks in and says, Daddy, I want to play baseball. You come play ball with us? And he's like, I'm busy. I'm reading the newspaper. He's reading the newspaper. And the little boy comes back a little bit later. He says, Daddy, hey, I really, it's a beautiful sunny day outside. Please, can we go play? And the dad, he turns the page of the newspaper and he sees this advertisement that's got a map of the world. And he has this idea, and he tears out the circle of the map, and he tears it up in a little piece of paper, and he throws it on the floor. He says, son, you need to learn your geography. You go get some tape. You tape together every single little piece, every country where it's supposed to be, every ocean, everything where it's supposed to be. You put that whole world together. You do it right. I'll go play baseball with you. He thinks it's going to take an hour. About 5 minutes later, the little boy comes back, and it's perfect. It's perfectly put together. And the dad says, what? How did you do that? And the little boy says, well, he said, there was a picture of a man on the other side. I just put the man together, and the whole world came together. Guys, that's the answer. We all have to just look inside. What do we need to do to be a better mother, a better father, a better husband, a better wife? What do we need to do to show up better with our employees and our people around us? How is that ripple effect, that transfer of emotion, how is it affecting other people? This is what we have to ask ourselves. And guys, you can, for $5 a month, you can make a massive impact. Find a charity that you can get behind. Find something that you can make a difference on. I would love to have you join us at the childliberation.org and be a part of the movement that we are creating. And if you have some heavy stuff that you need to release, find some tools to do so. You can go online. We have some tools in breath work and meditation tools that you can do from home that can help you release it. You can find some other things on liberatinghumanity.com. But find ways to step into the highest and best version of yourself.
Wow, honestly, I'm blown away. This has been phenomenal. Thank you for spending all the extra time with us, Paul. I know you're a busy guy. I'm going to let you go and close the show. And viewers, please support Paul. Add his links in the description. Take care, my friend. Cheers.
Thank you, Shaun. Love you, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. Much love from the UK. Cheers. Oh, my goodness, viewers. Honestly, some of the things that he's described and some of the stories that he's experienced. Bloody hell. 1 minute I needed a puke bag. 1 minute I felt like I was going to start crying. I saw so many of the viewers say that they were crying, but it's just so important, that we acknowledge that these things are happening, because if these things are just too horrific to talk about, how can we ever shine a light on these monsters and flush them out from doing these things and make them face the consequences of their actions? If society is too afraid to go there, then it is a shield protecting these monsters, because they know society doesn't want to look under that rock. But Paul has not just looked under the rock, he's gone under the rock and done his thing. And it's great, when he described the kids getting separated from the parents, the menus, all of this stuff. Oh, it just makes you so angry, especially if you're a parent and you just imagine these evil people getting their hands on your child and how helpless and hopeless you must feel. Once the child's gone in the blink of an eye, woof, it's too late, isn't it? What's the likelihood of getting the child back? Not very easy. How much damage is going to be done in the meantime? Is the child possibly going to be unalived? All these things that are going through your head. It's crazy. So huge thank you to Shane for organizing this really important podcast. I'm made up that Paul stayed on and gave us so much of his time. So please support him at his links. I know many of you are interested in the geopolitics, the Iran war, Epstein, all that stuff. We've got Ryan Dawson coming on at 11 a.m. tomorrow to go over all of that, folks. So he'll be doing a deep dive. So get your questions ready on that subject. And I hope to see some of you in the stream tomorrow. Take care wherever you are in the world. Thank you for tuning in.